I cannot believe 2015 is coming to a close so quickly. It is crazy, but at that very same time I'm really excited because I love making this video that I do every year, and that's talking about my favorite books of the year. I have 10 books here that I'm going to be talking about. These are the top 10 books that I read in 2015. They're not necessarily books that were released in 2015, they're just books that I read, so just thought I would say that. The first book I love this year is actually a graphic novel. I don't read graphic novels at all, ever, but I read these and I fell in love with them, and that is Saga. And this is the first one, but I read all of the rest, so I'm just gonna conclude them all as one. If you love graphic novels, you probably have already read this, but I'm gonna tell you what it's about. There are these two worlds, they're at war, and then these two people from opposite worlds fall in love, and they have a kid, and that's a huge no-no, and that causes so much chaos, and then a lot of people are after them, trying to kill them. There's a lot of other stuff going on. It's just great, and I just love it. I love it so much, and I think everyone should read them. Well, maybe not everyone. It does have a lot of adult content, so if you're not mature enough, don't read them, but if you are, go for it. The next book I really loved is The Mist by Stephen King. I read a few Stephen King books, including Salem's Lot and Joyland, but I read this one and for some reason I just loved it oh so much, and I loved the movie. It's one of my favorites, so that's probably why this book landed on my list. This book is about a town where this storm happens. It causes a lot of damage. A lot of people go down to the supermarket. While they're there, this giant fog just goes in and swoops into the town, and in that fog are these monsters and they start killing people. If you love Stephen King, if you love horror, anything like that, definitely check out this book. I loved it. Lair of Dreams by Libba Bray. The Diviners, which was the first novel to this, I want to say series, was on my list a couple years ago, I want to say. This book really just continued the awesome storytelling that the first one gave me, and for that I had to put it on this list. It was really great. I loved the new concept of this book. I can't really say much about this second book without spoiling you for the series, so I'm not gonna really talk about this, but this book sort of centers around a lot of people that live in New York City during the 1920s that have supernatural abilities, and during their crazy life that they're going through, a lot of maybe ghosty figures come into play and they have to defeat them and whatnot. It's really great and I love this so much. It's a giant book. They're both huge, but just read them. They're great. The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. I went into this book not really knowing if I was gonna like it because I didn't know much about it, but it blew my expectations. I wouldn't necessarily categorize this story as a ghost story, but it definitely has that feel, and while you're reading it, it just calls out to you that it's a ghost story. This book is about a biographer who was called by a very popular author that not a lot of people know about. They're called to go and interview that said author on their life and to write a biography on this person, and there is a lot of crazy stuff that this author tells the biographer about her life that you wouldn't expect. This book is really sort of creepy and odd, but just beautifully written, and it just moves you, and I just enjoyed it so much, so read it. The next book that made my list is a middle grade book, and that is Tentacles by Roland Smith. This is the sequel to Cryptid Hunters, which I want to say I read earlier this year or last year. Maybe it was on my list. I don't remember. Anyway, I loved this book so much. It's so fast-paced and action-packed. The characters are so lovable. This book series centers on cryptozoology, which I don't read a lot, but I love cryptozoology. I find it so fascinating and interesting. So if you're a fan of that, definitely check out this book, and it's just so much fun. And if you like books that have to do with sea monsters and creatures, check out this book. It's so much fun. The next book is Whistling Past the Graveyard by Susan Crandall. This book is a coming of age story that is so raw and gritty and sad, but really good. This story centers on this young girl who lives with her grandmother. Her grandmother is, I don't want to say necessarily abusive, but sort of to that context, maybe emotionally abusive. So this young girl ends up running away in search of her long lost mother who she's never met before, and it's just her journey on finding her mom, and it's so good but sad. Next we have Nightmares, the Sleepwalker Tonic by Jason Segel and Kristen Miller. I read the first book last year and that made my favorites list, and this year same thing, the second book was just as great. I said this last year but I'm gonna say it again, this is the perfect Halloween read. I read this book I want to say right before Halloween and it really put me in that Halloween mode and I was just so amped for Halloween. It was great. Again, this is the second book in a series so I don't want to say much to spoil anyone, but the first book has to deal with a main character named Charlie. He's a young boy who is having nightmares and he hates his stepmom. He thinks that she's evil and a lot of stuff happens and it's just great. If you love middle grade, check out this book series. The next book that is on my list is actually a book that I think a lot of people ended up hating, but I loved it, and that is We All Looked Up by Tommy Wallach. This book is about a group of teenagers who are initially just expecting their doom because there is a meteorite that is heading towards the earth and they're all gonna die. They're told that they have 28 days before this meteorite strikes, and because of that these teenagers are tired with their labels and they kind of want to strip that away and just, you know, live for their last 28 days that they have. The ending of this book is really ambiguous and I could see people not liking that, but I really did. So yeah, I really like this book. The second to last book on this list is Hollow City, the second novel of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. That's a mouthful. I did read the second and the third book this year, but the second one is making my list just because out of the three books, the second one is my favorite. This is such a great book. This is a young adult trilogy on kids that have these supernatural abilities. They're stuck in this time loop. It's going to be made into a movie by Tim Burton, who I love oh so much, and I'm just so excited, and like I said, just read it. This book is great. It has a lot of pictures in it that just make this book so much better. Last book that made my list is a classic, and that is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I went into this book just thinking, oh, Peter Pan Disney edition in book form. This book surprised me so much because it was a lot darker than I thought it was gonna be. I didn't realize that a lot of these characters were so cruel, sort of. This book really just exceeded my expectations and I loved it so much, and I could definitely see myself rereading this a bunch of times, and you know, it's Peter Pan, so I loved it. And I think you all know the story of Peter Pan. You know, kid, stays young forever, Tinkerbell, Captain Hook, Lost Boys. Those are all my favorite books of 2015. I would love to know what your guys' favorite books of this year are. Leave your comments below. If you have read any of these books that I mentioned, tell me your thoughts and opinions. We could chat in the comments below. I hope you guys have a wonderful New Year's. Thank you guys all so much for subscribing. I appreciate it so much. I know I don't say it as much, but I really do appreciate it. You guys are all awesome. And yeah, okay, I'm gonna go now. Bye!